At my daughter's engagement dinner, my future son-in-law's mother stood up, raised her glass, and announced to 60 guests that my daughter should be grateful anyone wanted to marry her at all. She called my daughter a charity case. My future son-in-law sat right beside her, nodding, smiling, like his mother had just recited a prayer. My daughter didn't move. She sat frozen, her fingers gripping the tablecloth so hard her knuckles turned white. But I moved. I reached into my coat pocket and placed a small envelope in front of my daughter. "Open it," I said. When she read what was inside, her future mother-in-law's smile disappeared, and her son, he turned pale. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? What time is it there? If this story reaches you, it means someone in your life needs to hear it. Your comment, your share, might be the lifeline someone's been waiting for. 4 months before that dinner, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was my younger brother, Raymond. We hadn't spoken properly in almost 6 years. Not because of a fight, because Raymond had disappeared inside his own marriage and none of us knew how to reach him anymore. His voice on the phone didn't sound like my brother. It sounded like someone who'd been underwater for a very long time and had just barely broken the surface. "Walter," he said, "I need you to listen to me carefully. I met Raymond that Saturday at a diner off Route 9 inches Poughkeepsie. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. My brother had always been the sharper one, quick laugh, loud opinions, the kind of man who filled a room. The man sitting across from me looked hollowed out, like someone had taken a spoon and scraped away everything that made him Raymond. He ordered black coffee and didn't drink it. "I left Denise," he said. I stared at him. After 19 years? After 19 years of asking permission to breathe. He wrapped his hands around the mug. "She controlled the money, Walter. Every dollar. I had no bank account in my own name. No credit card. I drove a car registered to her. I lived in a house she owned. When I finally told her I wanted a divorce, I realized I had nothing. Not a single thing on paper that proved I existed." He told me about Denise's mother, Vivian. How Vivian had taught her daughter that a good wife manages everything, the finances, the schedule, the social circle. How control was disguised as competence. How isolation was dressed up as devotion. 19 years, he said. 19 years of being told I was lucky someone like her chose someone like me. 19 years of hearing that I wasn't smart enough to handle money, capable enough to make decisions, strong enough to survive without her. And the worst part? I believed it. I watched my brother's hands shake around that untouched coffee cup, and something ice-cold settled in my chest. Because 4 months from now, my daughter Sophie was marrying Marcus Webb, and Marcus's mother was a woman named Carolyn Webb. Raymond read my face before I said a word. "That's why I called you," he said quietly. "I've met Carolyn. I've seen how she talks to Sophie. I've seen the way Marcus watches his mother for approval before he speaks. It's the same pattern, Walter. Exactly the same." He leaned forward, and I could see the urgency burning behind his exhaustion. "Sophie needs something in her name. Only her name. Something no one can take. Not Marcus, not Carolyn, not a judge. She needs to know before it's too late that she has a way out, even if she never uses it. You're telling me to. I'm telling you to do what nobody did for me. Give her options. Give her proof that she's worth protecting. Because if you wait until she needs it, it'll already be too late." I drove home to Albany that evening with my brother's words circling my head like crows. Raymond, brilliant, accomplished. Funny, Raymond had been reduced to a man who couldn't look a waitress in the eye when he ordered coffee. 19 years of erosion had done that. Not fists, not bruises, just words, repeated daily, until he forgot who he was. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, a calculator, and a decision that would cost me everything I had left. I was 63 years old, retired machinist, one pension, one savings account my late wife Dorothy and I had built over 41 years of marriage, one pickup truck, and 4 months. So I did what any father would do when he sees the train coming and his daughter is standing on the tracks. I started dismantling my life to build hers. The first thing I sold was Dorothy's piano, a 1987 Yamaha upright she'd played every Sunday morning for as long as I could remember. I can still hear her playing hymns while the bacon popped in the kitchen. I sat on the bench one last time, pressed a single key, middle C, her favorite starting note, and whispered that I was sorry. A music teacher from Saratoga bought it for her students. She promised it would be loved. That helped. Then came the truck. 14 years of hauling lumber, driving to Sophie's soccer games, teaching my daughter to parallel park in a Walmart lot. A contractor bought it. Good man. I showed him the trick to get the heater working in February and told him she'd run forever if he changed the oil on time. After that, I started walking. My knees complained in ways I'd forgotten knees could complain. But every ache reminded me of Sophie's face, and I kept moving. I picked up work where I could find it. Fixed furnaces for neighbors. Helped a buddy remodel his bathroom. On Saturdays, I taught basic woodworking at the community center for $50 a session. The pay was almost nothing. But almost nothing, stacked up over 4 months, becomes something. 4 months of peanut butter sandwiches and instant coffee. 4 months of falling asleep at my kitchen table with spreadsheets and legal documents. 4 months of being absolutely certain I was doing the right thing. I found the attorney through my union, Linda Gallagher, a property lawyer in downtown Albany. Sharp, careful, the kind of person who reads every word twice before signing anything. I told her what I wanted. An apartment. A 2-bedroom condo in Sophie's name. Only Sophie's name. No joint ownership. No marital claim. An ironclad clause that the property could never be transferred, sold, or encumbered without Sophie's sole written consent. I wanted it bulletproof. Linda took off her glasses and studied me. That's aggressive, Walter. If her husband finds out before the wedding, it could cause problems. I know, I said. But my brother lost everything because nobody gave him an escape hatch. I won't make the same mistake with my daughter. She nodded slowly. Then let's make this airtight. We found the condo on Madison Avenue. 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, hardwood floors, walking distance to the bus line. Nothing fancy, but solid, safe. The kind of place a woman could lock the door and know the world couldn't get in. I signed the papers 2 weeks before the engagement dinner. The condo was legally, completely, irrevocably Sophie's. She had no idea it existed. The engagement dinner was held at a restaurant in Westchester that Carolyn had chosen and Carolyn had paid for, and Carolyn made sure every single guest knew both of those things before they'd even unfolded their napkins. I sat at the family table with a small envelope in my coat pocket. I touched it every few minutes to make sure it was real. Sophie looked beautiful. She always did. But I noticed what a father notices. The way she glanced at Marcus before she laughed, checking if it was okay. The way she straightened her posture when Carolyn walked past. The way she'd become a little smaller since the last time I'd seen her. The evening moved along champagne, appetizers, small talk, designed to impress. Carolyn floated between tables like she was hosting the Academy Awards. Then she stood up and tapped her glass. The room went quiet. I'd like to say a few words about our future daughter-in-law, Carolyn announced, her smile wide and practiced. When Marcus first brought Sophie home, I'll be honest, I had my doubts. She comes from a modest background. Very modest. She paused, letting that word sit in the air like a stain. But I told Marcus, every family needs someone who understands hard work. Someone who knows what it's like to struggle. Sophie should be grateful, truly grateful that our family is welcoming her in. Not every girl from her circumstances gets this kind of opportunity. She raised her glass. To Sophie, our little charity case who got lucky. Scattered, uncomfortable laughter. A few people clapped because they didn't know what else to do. Marcus sat beside Sophie. He didn't flinch. He didn't defend her. He picked up his glass and nodded at his mother like she'd just delivered a toast at the United Nations. I looked at my daughter. I watched the color drain from her face. I watched her try to smile, try to make it a joke, try to swallow the humiliation in front of 60 people who were watching her be publicly reduced to nothing. That's when I stood up. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. I stood slowly, deliberately, the way a man stands when he's been waiting for exactly this moment. Every eye in that restaurant turned to me. I walked to my daughter. I placed my hand on her shoulder. Then I put the envelope on the table in front of her. My daughter, I said, my voice steady and clear enough for every table to hear, is nobody's charity case. She never has been. Open it, sweetheart. Sophie's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. She pulled out the deed. Her eyes moved across, the words confused at first, then understanding, then filling with tears. Different tears than the ones Carolyn had just caused. Read it, I said. Read it out loud. Her voice shook but held. Property deed, sole owner, Sophie Marie Callahan. Address, 714 Madison Avenue, Unit 4B, Albany, New York. Non-transferable, non-encumberable, sole discretion of owner. The room went dead silent. 60 people frozen, Carolyn's face cycling through shock, confusion, and fury in under 3 seconds. Marcus's expression was what I'll never forget. The smile evaporated, his jaw locked. His eyes went dark with something I recognized instantly because I'd seen it in my brother's description of Denise. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of losing control. He just realized that his new wife would own something he could never touch, and that terrified him. Then something happened that I didn't expect. Gerald Webb, Marcus's father, 70 years old, silver-haired, quiet the entire evening, slowly stood from his chair. The room shifted its attention. Gerald hadn't spoken all night. Most people probably forgot he was there. That's how it worked in Carolyn's world. Gerald existed in the margins. He walked over to where Sophie sat and looked at her with an expression that cracked something open inside my chest. It was recognition. The recognition of someone who understood exactly what that envelope meant because he'd needed one himself and never gotten it. "You're a wise young woman to have a father like this," he said softly. Then he looked at me. His eyes were wet. "My sister," he said, his voice rough but steady. "My sister married into a family like ours 30 years ago. She gave up her career, her savings, her friends. When she finally tried to leave, she discovered she owned nothing, not even the car she drove." He paused. I watched it happen and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place. He put his hand on my arm. "You didn't make that mistake, and I respect you more than I can say." Carolyn's voice sliced through the room like broken glass. "Gerald, sit down, now." Gerald turned to his wife. For a long moment, they stared at each other, and I could see decades of silence cracking apart in real time. He didn't sit down. He didn't argue either. He simply turned back to Sophie, nodded once, and walked out of the restaurant. That was the first time I ever saw Carolyn Webb speechless. Marcus leaned over to his mother and whispered something urgent. I didn't need to hear it. His face said everything. The plan had changed. The narrative had shifted, and the woman he was about to marry had just become someone he couldn't fully own. The engagement dinner ended 20 minutes later. Nobody touched dessert. They got married anyway. Sophie told me she loved him. I told her I loved her more, and that the condo would be waiting whenever she needed it. She hugged me and said I was being dramatic. I prayed every night that she was right. She wasn't. The first sign came 2 months after the wedding. Sophie's phone calls changed. Where she used to call me every other day telling me about a client presentation that went well, a recipe she'd burned trying to impress Marcus, a hiking trail she'd found upstate. Now the calls were short, clipped, careful. "Hi, Dad. How are you, sweetheart?" "Fine." "Marcus is waiting. Gotta go." Click. I told myself newlyweds needed space. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Raymond's story had made me see threats that weren't there. Then her friend Danielle called me. Danielle Torres had been Sophie's best friend since their freshman year at SUNY. They'd backpacked through Portugal together. They'd started a book club that met every month for 7 years without missing once. Danielle's voice was cautious, measured, like someone describing a car accident they'd just witnessed. "Walter, Sophie told me we can't be friends anymore. She said Marcus feels her old friendships are holding her back from growing as a wife." Those were her exact words. Growing as a wife. That doesn't even sound like Sophie. My stomach dropped through the floor. I drove to their house in Westchester, unannounced, the following Sunday. Sophie answered the door, and I barely recognized my own daughter. She was wearing clothes I'd never seen, muted, conservative, like a costume. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun. She'd lost weight, not healthy weight. The kind of weight a person loses when they're too anxious to eat. "Hi, Dad," she said, and her eyes flickered past me to check the driveway. Her eyes, they looked like Raymond's had at that diner. Hollow, apologetic, afraid. I asked about her job. She'd been a rising account manager at a marketing agency in the city. She loved that work. It was hers. "Oh," she said too casually. "I left the firm. Marcus thinks it's better if I focus on setting up the house. He wants to start a family soon." She recited it like a script. That evening, I called Raymond. I told him everything. The shortened calls. Danielle cut off. The job abandoned. the way Sophie couldn't hold eye contact. Raymond was quiet for a long time. "It's happening," he said. "Exactly like Denise did to me. First the friends go, then the job, then the money. Then you wake up one morning and realize you don't exist outside of their permission." He paused. "The condo isn't enough, Walter. She needs to know she deserves to use it." He was right. Every legal document in the world meant nothing if my daughter was too afraid, too isolated, too gaslit to walk through the door. Marcus had learned from the engagement dinner. He'd learned that public confrontation was dangerous. So he worked quietly. Daily erosions, small permissions, financial dependence, social suffocation. He was building a cage so slowly that Sophie couldn't feel the walls going up. It took me 3 more weeks and one conversation with a domestic violence counselor named Patricia Reed to understand what needed to happen. Patricia was direct. "She needs professional support, Walter. Not just a property deed. She needs to hear from someone qualified that what's happening to her is abuse. Because right now, she thinks it's love." I called Linda Gallagher, same attorney. We arranged a meeting. The hard part was getting Sophie there. I told her I needed help with my estate planning. That I wanted her present because she was my only beneficiary. It was the one request Marcus couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. Sophie sat in Linda's office on a Wednesday afternoon, nervous, glancing at her phone every 30 seconds. Linda placed the condo deed on the table. "This property is yours, Sophie. Completely. Your husband has 0 legal claim to it. It cannot be transferred, mortgaged, or encumbered by anyone but you." Sophie stared at the paper. "I know. Dad already." Linda continued. "Does your husband monitor your phone, your spending, your friendships?" Sophie went rigid. He's just protective." Patricia Reed spoke next. She'd been sitting quietly in the corner. She was gentle but unflinching. "Sophie, I work with women and men who've experienced what you're describing. Protective partners don't isolate you from every friend. They don't convince you to quit a job you love. They don't monitor your location. What you're experiencing has a name. It's coercive control, and it's abuse." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "But he says he loves me." "I'm sure he does," Patricia said. "But love that requires you to disappear isn't love. It's ownership." The room was very quiet. Sophie looked at me, and in that moment, I saw my daughter come back. Not fully, but a flicker, like a pilot light reigniting after being snuffed out. She whispered, "What do I do?" Linda pulled out the paperwork. "Do you want to file for divorce?" Sophie closed her eyes. When she opened them, the flicker had become a flame. "Yes." We left the office 40 minutes later with signed documents. As I drove Sophie back to Westchester, she stared out the window and said something that split my heart in two. "I'm scared, Dad. Not of leaving, of what he'll do when he finds out." "You won't be alone," I said. "I promise you that." We had a plan. Patricia had coordinated with a domestic violence advocate. Sophie would pack essential documents and personal items over the next 2 days while Marcus was at work. On Friday, she would leave and go directly to the condo. Linda would file the divorce papers that same afternoon. We never made it to Friday. Sophie called me Thursday night at 9:14. Her voice was barely a whisper. "He found the papers, Dad. He went through my bag." I was already grabbing my keys. "He took my phone. I'm using the neighbor's. He locked the bedroom door from outside. He said I'm not leaving until I come to my senses." I said, "Stay away from the door. Don't engage him. I'm calling the police right now, and I'm coming." I dialed 911 before I'd even reached my car. My daughter is locked in a bedroom against her will. Her husband discovered she's filing for divorce, and he's imprisoned her in the room. She's in danger. I'm sending the address now. The dispatcher's voice was calm. "Officers are being dispatched. ETA approximately 4 minutes. Stay on the line, sir." I drove faster than I should have. My hands shook on the wheel. Every red light felt like a year. I kept hearing Sophie's whisper on a loop. "He locked the door." Dad and every cell in my body screamed. When I pulled onto their street, 2 patrol cars were already there. Lights on, no sirens. Officers were approaching the front door. I ran from my car. An officer name tag read Delgado put up a hand. "Are you the father?" "Yes." "She's upstairs. He locked her in. We're aware. Stay back." They entered the house. I heard them moving up the stairs. Then Marcus's voice, controlled, calculated. This is a private matter between a husband and wife. There's no issue here. She's upset. I'm giving her space. Officer Delgado's voice was flat. Is the bedroom door locked from the outside, sir? Silence. That constitutes unlawful imprisonment under New York Penal Law, Section 135. Step away from the door now. From inside the room, Sophie's voice desperate, small, breaking. Please. He locked me in. Please, help me. I heard the lock break. The door opened, and then footsteps fast, stumbling, and Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs. She saw me in the doorway, and she ran. She crashed into me, and I held her so tight I thought my arms would break. She was shaking, her whole body vibrating like a struck bell. You're safe, I said into her hair. I've got you. You're safe now. It's over. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears hit my collar. Behind us, I heard the officer's voice, measured and final. Marcus Webb, you are under arrest for unlawful imprisonment. You have the right to remain silent. As they brought him down the stairs in handcuffs, Marcus looked at me. His eyes were something I'll never forget. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Disbelief. Like a man watching his empire collapse and not understanding why. You did this, he said. You poisoned her against me. I held my daughter tighter and looked him dead in the eye. No, Marcus, you did this. Every single day, you did this. I just made sure she had a way out. They put him in the patrol car. The door closed. The night went quiet. Sophie clung to me on the front steps. The October air was cold, and she was still trembling. But as the police car pulled away, I felt something release in her, a tension she'd been carrying for months, maybe years. The kind of tension that lives in your bones when you've forgotten what safety feels like. It's over, Dad, she whispered. The worst part is, I said gently, but the best part is just beginning. Sophie told her story to Detective Marsh at the precinct that night. Every detail. The financial control Marcus had transferred all her savings into a joint account, then changed the password. The phone monitoring he'd installed tracking software the week after their wedding. The friends erased one by one. The career dismantled. The daily interrogations disguised as concern. She told them everything calmly, clearly, with the steady voice of a woman who'd finally stopped doubting her own reality. Detective Marsh documented it all. Unlawful imprisonment, coercive control, financial abuse, pattern of isolating behavior. You have a strong case, he told her. A very strong case. 3 months later, we stood in a courtroom in White Plains. Linda Gallagher stood beside Sophie, composed and prepared. Across the room, Marcus sat with his attorney-expensive suit, rehearsed arguments, a strategy built on making Sophie look unstable. His lawyer argued that Sophie had exaggerated, that the locked door was a misunderstanding, that Marcus was a devoted husband dealing with a wife influenced by her overbearing father. When he finished, Linda rose. Your Honor, coercive control is not a misunderstanding. It is a pattern. My client's husband systematically eliminated every source of independence she had. He removed her financial access. He ended her career. He severed her friendships. He monitored her movements. And when she tried to exercise her legal right to file for divorce, he physically imprisoned her. She paused and looked at the judge. That is not a troubled marriage. That is a crime. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and no patience for theater, turned to Marcus. Mr. Webb, do you wish to make a statement? Marcus's jaw tightened. His lawyer whispered urgently. Marcus said nothing. The judge nodded. Based on the evidence presented, including the police report, Detective Marsh's investigation, and the testimony provided, this court grants the divorce on grounds of domestic abuse. The property at 714 Madison Avenue remains the sole and exclusive property of Sophie Marie Callahan. A permanent order of protection is issued. No contact, no communication, no approach within 500 feet. The gavel fell. Marcus stood. For a moment, his mask slipped completely. I saw the real man underneath, not the charming son, not the devoted husband, but someone who had just lost the only thing he ever truly valued. Control. His lawyer pulled him toward the exit. Carolyn Webb sat in the gallery, rigid, staring straight ahead, seeing nothing. Sophie walked out of that courthouse holding the divorce papers and the deed to her condo. The November sun was sharp and bright. Wind lifted her hair, and for the first time in over a year, my daughter looked like herself. She found me on the courthouse steps. We didn't speak. We just held each other while the world kept moving around us. "It's done, Dad," she said. "No, sweetheart. Now the real work starts." That first week, Sophie moved into the Madison Avenue condo. I helped her carry boxes up the stairs. She didn't have much. Marcus had controlled what she owned, so most of what she brought fit in the back of a borrowed van. But she walked through those rooms, touching the walls, opening closets, standing in the kitchen like she was relearning what it meant to exist in a space that belonged entirely to her. She sat on the living room floor that first night, no furniture yet, just a blanket and a pillow, and she laughed. A real laugh, not the careful, measured sound she'd learned to produce during her marriage. This was unguarded, surprised, hers. She called me later. "Dad, I made my own dinner tonight. I chose what to eat. I chose when to eat it. I sat wherever I wanted, and nobody asked me why. I had to hold the phone away from my face so she wouldn't hear me cry." Patricia Reed continued working with Sophie twice a week. Therapy, rebuilding, learning to trust her own decisions again after a year of being told she was incapable of making them. Raymond came to visit. He sat with Sophie in her small living room and told her his story, the full version, the parts he'd never shared with anyone. They talked for 3 hours. When he left, Sophie hugged him and said, "Thank you for saving me. Because you saved Dad's eyes before it was too late." Raymond cried in my car afterward. We sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes saying nothing. Sometimes silence between brothers says everything. 2 months later, Sophie went back to work. Her old agency didn't just welcome her back, they promoted her. Senior account director. Full autonomy. A raise that made her laugh because she'd forgotten what it felt like to earn money that was actually hers. She rebuilt her friendships. Danielle came back first, then others. The book club resumed, and Sophie hosted the first meeting at her condo. 8 women crowded into her living room with wine and paperbacks and laughter that carried through the walls. One evening, I came to visit and found Sophie on her balcony. The city lights spread below her like scattered diamonds. She looked up when I stepped outside, and I saw it, the woman my daughter was always meant to be. Not the shadow Marcus had tried to reduce her to. The real Sophie, strong, clear-eyed, whole. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" She smiled. "I'm doing something I forgot was possible, Dad. I'm making decisions, small ones. What to eat for breakfast, what to watch before bed, whether to go for a walk or stay home." She paused. They sound so small. But after a year of asking permission for everything, they feel enormous. I sat beside her. "They're not small," I said. "They're everything." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. "You know what that condo really was, Dad? It wasn't just property. It wasn't just an escape route. It was you telling me I was worth protecting, that I mattered enough for you to sell Mom's piano in your truck and eat peanut butter for 4 months. She looked at me. That's what saved me. Not the walls and the floors, the message. I looked at my daughter, and I understood that every sacrifice, every aching bus ride, every cold morning without a truck, every night I fell asleep at the kitchen table running numbers had been worth it. Not because the condo saved her life, but because it told her that her life was worth saving. 6 months after the divorce, I visited Sophie on a Sunday afternoon. She was rearranging her bookshelf, music playing from a speaker, coffee brewing in the kitchen. The condo felt lived in now, photos on the walls, a plant on the windowsill that she was somehow keeping alive, a small wooden shelf I'd built for her, the only piece of furniture from my old workshop that I'd kept. She poured me a cup of coffee, and we sat on her balcony. "Dad, I need to tell you something." I waited. Raymond called me yesterday. He's filing a civil suit against Denise for financial abuse. He's using the same attorney, Linda. She looked at me. He said watching me fight gave him the courage to fight for himself. I set down my coffee because my hands weren't steady enough to hold it. He also said to tell you that you didn't just save your daughter. You saved your brother, too. I thought about Raymond at that diner in Poughkeepsie, hollowed out, shaking hands, a man who'd been erased, and now he was fighting back, because he'd watched Sophie fight back, because someone had shown both of them that fighting was possible. That evening, as I walked to the bus stop, still no truck, still didn't need one, I passed a father and his young daughter on the sidewalk. She couldn't have been more than 5. She was walking on the curb like it was a balance beam, arms spread wide, laughing every time she wobbled. Her father walked beside her, hands ready to catch her if she fell, but never grabbing her. Just present, just there. I watched them until they turned the corner, and I understood something I'd been learning all year. Protecting someone doesn't mean building walls around them. It means giving them the tools to build their own walls, their own doors, their own keys, and then trusting them to know when to lock the door and when to open it. My name is Walter Callahan, and this is my story. For over a year, I watched my daughter disappear into a relationship that looked perfect from the outside. I told myself she was happy. I told myself it wasn't my place. My brother's phone call proved me wrong. So don't be like me. Don't wait for the phone call. If someone you love is being isolated, controlled, diminished, if they're asking permission to exist, speak up. Your voice might be the one that breaks through. This story taught me one thing above all else. Freedom isn't free. It costs a piano your wife played every Sunday. It costs a truck you loved like a friend. It costs 4 months of exhaustion and peanut butter sandwiches, and falling asleep over spreadsheets. But it's worth every penny, because when my daughter sat on her own balcony, in her own home, drinking her own coffee, making her own choices, I understood why I'd given everything. Not because I'd defeated Marcus, not because justice was served, though it was, but because my daughter knew, truly knew, deep in her bones that she was free, that she had always deserved to be free, and that no one would ever convince her otherwise again. And my brother Raymond, he's learning the same lesson, slower, harder, but he's learning. Because freedom doesn't have an age limit, and it's never too late to choose yourself. These stories aren't entertainment, they're warnings, they're proof, they're lifelines. If you recognize yourself in this story, if you're trapped, controlled, or afraid, please reach out. You deserve choices. You deserve your own keys. Comment below, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe to nb-sweetrevenge for more stories that matter. Because every story has the power to save someone, and every voice deserves to be heard.